With our raw grief and our many questions, we gather together with our community of faith. I offer no answers to how or why something like this could happen, but I am glad that you are here to hold our loved ones and one another a little tighter, to send our collective prayers to a town in mourning, and to light candles of memory, witness, and healing. This morning we light our chalice as a symbol of our faith and also a candle for all those affected by Friday's events. Let's do this in silence. Have a moment of silence as we send our prayers in love. Our opening words this morning are in honor of the winter solstice coming up on Friday, and they're by Susan Cooper. And so the shortest day came, and the year died, and everywhere down the centuries of the snow-white world came people singing, dancing, to drive the dark away. They lighted candles in the winter trees. They hung their homes with evergreen. They burned beseeching fires all night long to keep the year alive. And when the New Year's sunshine blazed awake, they shouted, reveling. Through all the frosty ages, you can hear them echoing behind us. Listen. All the long echoes sing the same delight this shortest day. As promise wakens in the sleeping land, they carol, feast, give thanks, and dearly love their friends, and hope for peace. And now, so do we here, this year and every year. Welcome, Yule. Spirit of life, help us to cradle our broken hearts. We lift up our prayers of loving comfort for all those who have suffered loss, for all those who do not feel safe, and for all children everywhere. And I continue with these words by my friend and mentor, Elizabeth Strong. Soon the darkness of the year will be lifted, and the time of light will grow longer. We have gathered with an anticipation of hope for peace on earth and in our homes. We have gathered in this season of celebrations, seeking comfort to soften the pain and the losses of our lives. We have gathered to worship joyfully within this season of celebrations, with the tenderness and love of family and friends around us. Let us be embraced by the strength and power of this sacred space that we each bring as we create this beloved community. Let joy and sorrow join in the fullness of our living. Let the power and strength we embody join us together as we move through this season into a new year with a new vision of hope for peace on earth. Let us be silent together. So be it. Our reading this morning is by Louise Rehnquist, called I Like a Quiet Day. After the birthday cards, calls, cake and candles, the bluster and poof of celebration, I like a quiet day. Sun sifting through shade, spring green branches of willow drifting in a slow dance, a pillow at my back. I consider the possibility of playing the piano. After the holidays, tinseled trees, turkey, Tabasco, for sound and heat, not for aptness, the bluster and poof of special days. I like a quiet day. Rain keeping me in, I say, though it is more I want to be alone, without anyone to remind me how I should feel, what ought to be done next. After travel, airports, arrangements, aperitifs on a veranda, the bluster and poof of other ways, I like a quiet day. Let the world churn on without me. Active participation requires too much. A trip to the gym, an opinion on which wildlife should be saved. What about all these things? After overnight guests, laughing, lounging, learning about one another, the bluster and poof of it all, I like a quiet day. To take me back to the me that I am without expectations, schedules, dinner to eat inappropriately, and laugh at a silly sitcom. After all, I need the celebration, holidays, travel, and guests to provide setting, context, place. The quiet day to know who and where I am. 16 years ago, at about this time of year, my mother stopped at the corner store on her way home from work. A woman who she knew by face but not by name approached her and said, "I've been meaning to call you, to invite you to a quiet day at St. Margaret's Convent on Saturday." My mother was surprised at the invitation, since she really didn't think that the woman even knew who she was. Wanting to be polite, this always gets us into trouble, doesn't it? My mother asked the woman to tell her a little bit more about the quiet day. She answered that it was a day of prayer and meditation and quiet. It begins with morning prayer, she said. Then you're free to do whatever you want, as long as you remain in silence. At noon, they ring a bell, and everyone comes back together for noon prayer, and then hot soup for lunch, eaten in silence. After lunch, there's more free, silent meditation time, and then we come back together again at 3 for closing prayer. At that point in my mother's life, she had never done anything like this. But a day of quiet sounded very appealing to her just then. She had already entered into her frantic pre-Christmas state of being, a whirlwind of shopping, rehearsals, concerts, parties, not to mention work and family. My mother asked the woman how much this silent day would cost, and when she told her $12, Mom decided to take the risk. "Yes," she said, "I'd be very interested in going." The woman told my mother that she would call and register her. "Do you know my name?" my skeptical mother asked. "Of course," she said, and then the woman offered to pick her up on Saturday morning. This my mother declined, thinking wisely that if the silent day was a bust, she wanted to be able to get out of there under her own steam. They agreed to meet in the convent parking lot. That Saturday morning, my mother drove to the convent, but found no woman waiting for her in the parking lot. She waited for a while, and when the woman didn't appear, she ventured nervously up to the doors on her own. Inside, she was welcomed by the leader of the day, Sister Elizabeth. Mom told Sister Elizabeth that someone had called to register her and gave the nun her name. Sister Elizabeth looked at her list, and not surprisingly, my mother's name was not on it. If there was any doubt before that this was a case of mistaken identity, it was clear now. But Sister Elizabeth simply added her to the list and took her $12. My mother was rather anxious, wondering what she had gotten herself into. Should she have left? She was awfully relieved that Sister Elizabeth had already called for silence when the convenience store woman finally rushed in. They couldn't speak, so they nodded their heads to each other and smiled. Sister Elizabeth gathered the retreat participants in a large, sparsely but beautifully decorated room and seated them in a circle. She laid out 4 things before her: a wheel from a toy car, a tuning fork, an empty bowl, and a group picture. Then she went on to explain what each of these things represented. The wheel. In pre-Christian times, people stopped their work in the dark time as the days brought them to the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year. They took the wheels from their carts and brought them inside and decorated them with greens and awaited the return of the light. They took the time to be mindful of the dark as they anticipated the solstice. The tuning fork, a reminder to listen, to quiet oneself, to be open to what is ahead, to whatever comes, and to be in tune with it. The empty bowl, half empty or half full, regardless, the bowl must be emptied out in order to receive, to be filled. Put into the bowl each day a straw or yarn for each blessing you receive during Advent, and it will be soft like the manger by Christmas Eve. A group picture. We are blessed in being open to each other's stories. Sister Elizabeth shared this one. Many, many years ago, centuries ago really, there was a monastery that no one visited. Living in the forest nearby was an old rabbi. People flocked to him, seeking his wisdom. The abbot finally went out into the forest. He too sought the rabbi's wisdom. He asked, "Why aren't people coming to us?" The rabbi replied, "I will tell you this secret just once. Amongst you lives the Messiah." The abbot hurried back to the monastery and shared this secret with the other monks. They began looking for the Messiah in each other, and through this became a viable, loving community. They came to learn that the Messiah lives in every one of us. Following this introduction, Sister Elizabeth invited the group to use the day in whatever way they wished, as long as they maintained the silence. At first, my mother felt the need to be outside, not yet ready to go inward. She spent time walking around the grounds, gazing out over the bay. At last, though, she found herself in one of the tiny upstairs rooms. When she finally stopped and sat, she realized in the stillness that her cup was already full and overflowing. She sat on the straight-backed wooden chair and let the tears stream down her cheeks. Not until she had emptied herself could she truly enter the silence. Only then did she connect with her inner self. Anne LeClaire, the Cape Cod author who practices 2 whole days of silence every month as her spiritual practice, wrote this. When I was a child, I loved snow days, and I still do. Each one seems a gift, a day with no push to it, a vessel for holding the season's treasure of peace, receptivity, and quiet. Remember waking the morning after it has snowed in the night? The atmospheric shift, everything muted and new, sharp edges softened, the contours of the land coated with white, light refracted to silver, the day filled with mysterious promise. Waking to silence was like that, she says. By seeking stillness, I felt as if I were walking in fresh snow, leaving a single trail of footprints. My father, she says, a farmer, used to tell me that a spring snow was nature's fertilizer because it brought nitrogen to the earth. As I lay in bed contemplating the snow-like quality of the day, I recalled this memory and smiled at the idea of silence as the fertilizer for the soil of my soul. Back at the convent, my mother realized that it was not coincidence that had brought her to that place, that space of quiet, that space of simplicity, that space of beauty. And she realized that with her simple words and simple offerings, Sister Elizabeth had woven together 3 different faith traditions, Jewish, Christian, and pagan. And she had invited them to call on their own traditions, or whatever traditions resonated with them as they entered the silent space. We too are exploring this season through many different traditions. We lit the candles of the menorah last week. We will light candles during the longest night for solstice on Friday. Next Monday night, we will fill this sanctuary with song and candlelight for Christmas Eve. But I don't think that we have set aside enough time for stillness. Especially during this hectic holiday season, the pressure is on to do, to buy, to hustle, to fit it all in. A number of you have told me this month that with no other way to make you rest and be still, your bodies have literally forced you into quiet rest by getting you sick. And so sometimes our only quiet time comes wrapped in bathrobes and slippers and boxes of Kleenex on the couch. I know that when I looked at my schedule this past week and felt a desperate need to cut some things out, my first thought was meditation group. Time for rejuvenating ourselves is always the first thing that we cut. And so the hectic cycle continues. Thankfully, I had second thoughts about that. And the hour and a half of silence Monday night centered me for the whirlwind week ahead. I don't know when our next snow day will be, and perhaps we can't all make our way to a convent for a quiet day. And we might not all make it here on Monday nights for meditation, although you are invited, right, Tim? But we do have this time, this moment. And I invite you now to slow your breathing, to quiet your mind, and relax into the peace of this sacred space. No doing, no buying, no hustling. Just emptying our cups, letting the silence fertilize our souls. Let's be quiet together, just for a few minutes. I'll ring the bell to help us enter that space of silence, and again at the end to welcome us back. My mother writes, "This time apart, this quiet day, reminded me once again that it doesn't matter the tradition. It doesn't matter the vehicle or the path. What brings us to the open space of love and giving is not of consequence. The getting there is what matters. The getting there is what matters." This holiday season, take some time for quiet. Take some time for stillness. Take some time for what all of our religious traditions are pointing us towards, that open space of love and peace. Amen, and blessed be.